Hello everyone. In this video, let's create a serverless project and create two different lambdas. One lambda to publish the message and another lambda to receive the message that is published by lambda 1. Okay. So to create the project, I'll type serverless. So we'll take the Node.js starter project. We can even use this SQS worker directly. It will give the consumer SQS consumer, but let's start with starter and write on our own. So I'm naming it as a SQS testing. Okay, now the project is created. Okay. So now the project is created. I'll open this project in the Visual Studio Code. I opened this project in the Visual Studio Code. Once we look at it, the serverless YAML file. So the node version is 18 and we have simple one lambda function. Okay. And it has its own handler for this. Okay. So, and also we don't have a package.json right now. Okay. So as a first step to connect with SQS, the first thing that we need to do is we need to import the AWS SDK library. So for that reason, let's run npm install. So I'm installing AWS SDK. It will generate the package.json file. Okay, now you see the package.json is created. Okay, we got the AWS SDK. So as a first step, so we need a lambda function to publish the message first. Okay, so for that reason, let's change this particular function name to publish message to queue. So from this particular lambda function, we'll publish the message. Okay. So now let's go to index.js, change this name. Okay. And this particular name and this name should match. Okay. This within the index file, we are going to this particular lambda function. Okay. So within this right now, we don't have anything other than returning a success message. Okay. So as a first step in this, we need to import the AWS SDK. Okay. Okay, now the AWS SDK is available. So we'll set the configuration for this and within this, so let's go for the region. So the SQS that we are going to create, it will be part of the I'll create it in the US East one. Okay. For that reason, I'm setting the configuration like this. Okay. And also let's get the SQS from AWS. Okay. AWS dot SQS and we have to provide the version. Okay. This particular version is same across any application. There is no significance for this particular version. Currently it is the same. Okay. So now we got the SQS. Now we can write the logic. Okay. Within this to publish. Okay. SQS dot send message. Okay, so within this particular send message, the first one will be the parameters and if there is any error first process, so that's why we are setting the error first, then the result. Okay, so within this, okay, this should be a arrow function. Within this, since it is error first approach, first we need to check if there is an error, handle it here. Okay, if there is no error, that means it is successful. You can publish the actual result. Okay, let's add this in the stringify format so that it will be easy to read. Here, these parameters, these are the parameters that we need to pass, where we mention the queue name and additional configuration. Okay, within here, so the first one is the message that we want to publish. It will be of message body. Okay, we'll set this in a stringified JSON format. Okay, within this, what we will do is, I'll say this is a message. So hello message from. Okay, this is the message that we are going to publish. Okay, along with this particular parameter, we need to pass the queue URL. Here we need to pass the queue URL. Okay, we'll get to that. And if you want to add some additional parameters other than these two parameters, what you can do is you can set that as part of the message attributes. Within this message attributes, so you can set the properties. Right now, we can simply ignore these message attributes. We don't need. Okay, we need the queue name. Since I already created the queue name, I'll just copy paste that queue name. So this is a queue that we are going to use. So I already created this queue. So I'll just copy this queue URL and I'll keep it here. Okay. So that's all you need to write to publish the message to the queue. Okay, let's validate, try to run this and see. So to run the Lambda function in local with the serverless framework, you need to run serverless invoke local function and function name is this. Okay, if you see, this is the function name. Okay, let's see what happened. So it is successfully published. There are no issues. Okay, now we got the message body and message ID also. Okay, let's go to AWS and check whether there is a message. So now this is a queue. Okay, let me refresh this. Okay, now if you see, there is a message available. So that is published. Okay, let's publish one more. So this is one message that is already published. Okay, let's try to publish one more. Okay, currently this is what we published. We'll say number 2. Okay, number 2 here. Let's run this again. Okay, another message is published. Now when I refresh, it will become 2. Okay, there are 2 messages. Since there is no consumer to consume this particular message, so for that reason it is still available in the queue itself. Okay, now let's write the S3 consumer. Okay, to start the consumer, so the first step is, let's copy this and put here. So we will trigger this directly. As soon as there is a message, we will directly trigger. So for that reason, we will name it as trigger message from the queue. Okay, if you want to trigger this particular Lambda when there is a message, okay, automatically. So for that reason, we have to set this particular events. Okay, within the events, since it is SQS event, we'll set SQS. Okay, within the SQS, what we need to do is we need to set the ARN of the SQS. Okay, to get the ARN, click this queue. Okay, this is the ARN that you are going to get. Copy that ARN and keep it here of the queue. Okay, now the trigger point is done, trigger piece is done. Now let's write this Lambda to receive and perform some action or print that particular message to the console. Okay, so the Lambda name should match here. So since it is published, we don't need all these things. Okay, all we need is the message will come as part of the event. Okay, this is the input to the this particular function. Okay, for that reason we will simply get the message from. Okay, let's add here. So all we need to do is okay, that's all you need to do. See, because when it is triggered, you would get the actual message as part of the event itself. Okay, for now, let's remove this piece. Okay, let's check this particular message. Okay, but if you publish the message, it will trigger this, but you don't see that particular it won't trigger in local. Okay, since if you hit this particular Lambda, okay, since we are publishing here, but we are not, since we are just running this particular Lambda, for that reason it won't show the logs for the subscriber. Okay, now let's check how many messages are there. So there are 3 messages. Okay, to see this impact, to see this, okay, what we need to do is we need to publish this Lambdas to AWS account. So both the Lambdas are pushed to the AWS account. So let's go to Lambda. Okay, now you see there are multiple lambdas here. Okay, let's go to trigger lambda. By now the trigger should be already done because it is a trigger. As soon as the lambda is published, it would have triggered. Now if you see, okay, if you see the record is triggered, okay, so the message is already published, consumed at the consumer, the trigger lambda. Okay, this is one. Okay, now let's publish one more from the local. Now let's publish one more from the local and see that it is triggered and received at the trigger lambda. Okay, before we run this, we'll change the content of this to add some California, New York, Texas. Okay, I'm just adding these states to see it. Okay, now when I publish this, since the trigger lambda is already exist in the AWS account, so it will trigger. Okay, let's verify this particular trigger lambda logs. Okay, now if you see, it is received, the records are received at the trigger lambda, and if you see the body, so this is the content that we published, and these are the additional metadata information that is published, and this is coming from AWS itself. The major content is body. This is the message body. At the same time, if you want to add any additional message attributes, you can add here so that you can consume at the consumer level. So now if you see trigger lambda, so in this what we did was we created publish lambda and subscribe lambda. Okay, from the publish lambda we are publishing to the queue, and in the trigger lambda there is a SQS event. Okay, for that, since this particular SQS is configured to trigger, for that reason anytime when you publish a message into this particular queue, automatically it will trigger this particular lambda. Okay, so since it is triggering the lambda, it will be by default coming as part of the input which is of event. Okay, from the event you can directly consume it and perform whatever the logic that you want to perform. So this is how the SQS works.